Welcome back to the Spectre Creative Channel with me, your host, Scott ToyGuru Neitlich. And we continue our DCU Director's Commentary back in the saddle again. After a brief stop with those Green Lantern waves, we're back to a mainline wave. In fact, Wave 16. One of the final waves I worked on. I only worked through Wave 19, I think it was when the new team took over, so we're going to wrap up the waves I worked on before we get to the Signature series, which was the online continuation that I also worked on. But before that, we should do Wave 16 because that's what this video is about, which included amazing characters like Azrael, the Batman from the 90s, Robin, the Batman sidekick from forever. I mean, as in the definitive version of Robin. In fact, we did two versions of Robin because he's that cool and needed it. And then the Creeper. I don't know why I say it like that, but I do. Another Metal Man, Mercury, which is probably the most toyetic of all of them. Jonah Hex, our cowboy DC hero. And the Riddler, another version of the Riddler. We'd done the Riddler, but now another Riddler. And Bane, another character we had done, but now we did him at what would be considered, I guess, proper size as the collect and connect figure. Very important to do. And this was a very shelf-worthy wave. This was a great wave. I mean, it had core characters and it had really some fan favorites. So let's dive in. So Azrael in his Batman outfit. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the storyline, in the 90s, the comic book industry was shaken up a lot. And one of the big reasons was because of Image Comics. And yes, I know this image is actually not from the 90s, but it represents all the characters from Image, or at least a lot of them. So when Image came along, DC reacted by making some major changes to their main characters in order to compete with this new comic book company. And breaking Batman's back and having Superman battle to death with Doomsday were two of the most notable changes. Of course, neither of these lasted forever, but Batman with a broken back needed to heal, and while he did that, Azrael took over as the new, very, very 90s Batman, complete with all of the ammo belts on the legs, and the armor with the glowing red eyes, and the giant spikes, and the cape. I mean, honestly, this character looks like he could have been part of Image Comics, or at least part of the very 90s design of superheroes, which he was, which I guess makes sense. Now, after the Batman back-breaking story was over, Azrael did make it out as his own hero. He gave the mantle back to Bruce, and that figure's actually been done as toys a couple times, even by Mattel. Mattel did Azrael as in his non-Batman suit, as his regular superhero suit, in the DC Superheroes line that predated DC Universe Classics. And this was a really cool figure, actually, complete with the energy gauntlets and the whole 9 yards. Doing the cape overlay really showed off, or at least drew attention away from the regular buck underneath. And it was a very cool figure, but we hadn't tackled Azrael as Batman. And so this was our chance to do that. And he got all the parts needed. He got the giant gauntlets and the wires and the cape and the multi-part capes. And you don't keep this figure out, though. The cape tends to bend, so you got to make sure you always keep him on your shelf. He doesn't store very well. I do remember one time while I was working on this figure with the designer, one of the executives from Mattel walked over and saw that figure. It's like, no wonder you guys spend so much on tooling with this DC line. You're just burning money. And I was like, no, I swear, not every figure has this big of a cape. But I also showed how we were going to be able to get to reuse the figure in a red deco later on. And even though this executive had nothing to do with the line, I had to appease him and make a whole presentation. So that was a fun thing. Okay, the Riddler. The Riddler. We'd done a few Riddlers in DC Universe Classics. We'd already done the suit Riddler with the bowler cap and the cane, etc. That was in a Walmart wave. And it was a wave that we couldn't spend too much money on, but luckily we had the suit buck that was started with Clark Kent and got to be reused actually quite a lot throughout the course of DCU Classics. For a buck that we didn't think we would need originally, it wound up being like one of our number 4 or 5 bucks as far as reuse. But the Riddler got to use the regular buck when we did him in Wave 16 because it was just the skin suit with a new head, which also kind of helped pay for Azrael with all that stuff. Now, the Riddler in his different looks, either with the bowler hat in the suit or the skin-tight suit, can vary. I mean, he really is almost 50-50 as far as both versions showing up in pop culture, albeit in comic books and in movies and in toys. But we did see that the skin suit has obviously a heritage from the 80s showing up in the toy lines, and that was really a big part of DCU Classics, was paying homage to those type of lines. And in the live action, the skin suit tends to actually get used quite a lot. I mean, yeah, I mean Jim Carrey, in the 1966 Batman show. Well, actually, that one had both versions of the Riddler and two different people that played him. So maybe this is a bad example. But the point is, we wanted to offer another Riddler, especially because the first version of the Riddler was in a Walmart-only wave. And he really is a core Batman villain. And having someone new that Batman could punch in the face was very important, and we thought about that deliberately. So here was another Riddler, and it was one of the only major Batman villains that got 2 releases in DCU Classics. All right, speaking of Batman family characters, next up we have Robin. Robin is a character, there's been a lot of Robins. There's been grown-up Robins, and recruited Robins, and new Robins. Well, in all of DCU Classics, we had not really gotten to the classic version of Robin, meaning Dick Grayson, the original version of Robin, not necessarily from his first appearance, although honestly his first appearance outfit didn't really change that much over the years, and really became sort of the definitive version of him. And, we got to reuse that a few times. He grew up to be Nightwing, but we had done a previous Robin in DCU, which was, I guess, if you will, Robin 3, which was the current Robin. This was the one that was in Wave 2, Wave 3 of DCU Classics. And we'd repainted this buck kind of in Dick Grayson-y colors for a 2-pack about a year earlier. And this wasn't meant to take away from getting to do the true Dick Grayson one, but it was more of we needed to fill a slot with a repaint that was going to sell to kids. All right, so now it was our chance to pay that off for collectors and do a proper Dick Grayson Robin. And that's what this figure was all about. We did him with 2 different heads, so 2 different releases. One with more of a kind of 1940s style haircut, and one with a later haircut that was more, roughed up a bit in his face. But same buck, same figure, just 2 different portrait sculpts, both by the 4 Horsemen, and of course, they nail it every single time because they are so talented. And it is interesting how, fast forwarding to today, double heads tend to just get packed with figures. Almost every company does this, but back when we were doing DCU Classics, that wasn't as common. So splitting it up into 2 different figures kind of made sense. I think if DCU Classics had come out today, much like the later end DCU Classics like the Ray or most Marvel Legends figures that have multiple heads, we probably would have just done a swappable head and released both heads in the same pack. But, times change, and that's kind of the way it was back when DCU Classics was shipping, and he got 2 releases instead of 1. But hey, who knows? Next up, our cowboy, DC's cowboy, Jonah Hex, the cowboy from the future who goes back to the past to become a cowboy in the Old West. He's a great character. I mean, Jonah Hex is definitely one of my I'm not going to say a top favorite, but he's a very highly preferred character of mine. I don't really follow the comic book too much, and I know the movie wasn't exactly a huge hit, but I just love the concept of Jonah Hex. I'm big into time travel stories and characters, and Jonah Hex is a time-traveling character, and that's one of the things that makes him cool. My first introduction to him, I think, may have been the Batman animated series, where he made an appearance on one single episode, maybe a 2-parter. I'm sure someone will correct me in the comments below. And he later appeared on JLU, the proper, after Batman the Animated Series, in a more classic look, if you will, losing the long gray hair. And to this day, I still do regret that we never got to Jonah Hex as a figure in the Justice League Unlimited line. We did a lot of characters. I mean, JLU is almost one of the most definitive DC lines in itself, but it lacks a Jonah Hex, and it was always a hole that I felt was sort of, needed to be filled. But as far as the DCU Classic 6-inch figure, wow, this in a lot of ways really made up for it. I mean, he was amazing. And I want to say he was fully tooled, or at least almost all fully tooled, because he needed, all sorts of new cowboy pants and cowboy jackets and cowboy arms and boots and legs, and not to mention that amazing face that only the Horseman could pull off. As far as the theme, when we're talking about a cowboy figure, if you will, cowboy is one of the best selling themes to boys, or for action figures. It pops up all over the place and always sells really, really great to kids. It's just it's like, astronaut, cowboy, pirate, ninja. It's one of those, if you can throw a cowboy hat on a figure and a gold star on his chest, likely you're going to sell him to kids. And kind of made up for the fact that Jonah Hex had such a grotesque face, because giving him that cowboy hat makes him a lot more appealing to kids, and we did need to sell Jonah Hex to kids, not just collectors. He had other figures. DC Direct had taken stabs at Jonah Hex, but I think the Horsemen and the team at Mattel really wanted to make kind of a definitive one, and the face sculpt, I mean, the Horsemen just knocked it out of the park with that. I mean, that is just amazing. They are so, so talented. And that was Jonah Hex. He really came out well. He was our token cowboy, and he could ride off into the sunset. Next up, we have our third addition to the Metal Men. So we'd already done gold and iron. So this was now Mercury. And we now had 3 Metal Men, which was amazing, because the Metal Men, I may be mistaken, and again, comments below can correct me, but I don't think they've ever been done, except maybe like in Mini-Mates form or something like that. I don't think there's been a full set of Metal Men. And, giant scissors for hands, obviously, is a reoccurring theme in action figures. Terry decided to give giant scissors to his figure from Motu Classics. And the reason that Mercury can form things like giant scissors is because he's more liquid, if you will. I mean, he's a liquid metal. So he's always sort of more twisty and bendy. He's kind of almost like a combination of, I guess, Plastic Man or Mr. Fantastic plus Metal Man, or a Metal Men. Plural? Metal Men? Metal Mans? Metal Mans, I don't know. But he's very toyetic in that sense, because he can change shape and form and create things from his hands, kind of almost like Green Lantern constructs. And he's fun. I mean, he's also got a really great sense of humor in the comic books. He's a lot of the comedic relief for Metal Man comic books. So, with like a lot of his surprise pop out stuff. So it was great. We were like closing in on doing the whole team. We were very determined to finish this, especially because how colorful they are. They just stand out great, and the idea of having the entire team done in DCU Classic 6-inch was a major goal, and we're so, to date, I'm so proud of this. This was one of, I think, our best achievements for DCU Classics, was finishing the team. And Mercury was the last released in the waves, in proper waves. The rest got released in the Signature Series. But we'll get more into that as we hit that. All right, next up we have the Creeper. Everyone loves the Creeper, right? Not the Minecraft Creeper. This Creeper, the Creeper from DC Comics, the character with the yellow suit and the giant red bola, I guess, or I don't know what that is on his back, but it's like this giant thing of fluff. And I mean, he basically, he almost looks more like a clown than the Joker, but that's good, because bright colors sell to children. And again, as much as DCU Classics is meant for the adult collector, it needs to sell to kids to make up the gap in sales. If you're just selling to collectors, like we were with Signature Series, that's kind of why Signature Series ended. We didn't have the extra the extra kid purchase or gift giver purchase on top of the adult collector to keep the line going. So it was great to get it. We really always were conscious of that, of making sure the characters in the line were going to appeal to both kids and collectors at the same time. And Creeper really does that, because, I mean, look at the guy. He's bright and colorful, and he's got green hair and a yellow suit, and, again, that giant fluffy bola thing, fashion statement on his back. So, stands out. For some reason, I always confuse him with Freakazoid. I don't know why. I mean, I know they have nothing to do with each other, but I always think of Freakazoid when I see Creeper. And he makes a great toy. Every time he's done as a toy, I mean, you can see why he gets chosen for a lot of toy lines. He's toyetic. He has that quality. I've mentioned that in a lot of my videos. So No-brainer to get him into the line. All right, last up we have Bane, the man who broke Bruce Wayne's back. And I mentioned earlier with Riddler about revisiting DC characters that weren't that many that got revisited, but Bane is one of them. And a big reason for that is because he's a big guy. Bane is huge, especially when he pumps himself full of that venom, which is what you see in those green tubes going down to his arm controller. It pumps a chemical directly into his brain that causes him to buff up. Think of it as superpowered steroids, I guess. We had done Bane before. We had done him in the DC Superheroes line. But similar to Doomsday, he was way out of scale. He was basically in 6-inch scale, much like Doomsday in this line. And Bane is a big guy. Bane is huge. He should be bigger. So it was always sort of this nagging splinter in the mind's eye that Bane and Doomsday both needed to be corrected. And we did get to that eventually. And because of Bane's appearance in the final Dark Knight movie, it really opened him up as a toyetic character. Even though the movie didn't do too well with kids because it was dark, it really introduced Bane to the public, and he became one of sort of the go-to Batman villains in a lot of toy lines. He was suddenly like kind of this giant Mexican wrestler or giant red monster character that, just showed up a lot more in toy lines after the movie. But for a collector line, we wanted to do him right, and we wanted to give him a proper stance and a proper size, and that's why we included him as our Collect and Connect figure, finishing off Wave 16, another great wave in the Mattel DCU Classics toy line.